All right, welcome back to another live episode of the Relationship Series. My name is Gina Spataro, and this is my handsome brother, Sam Spataro. Tonight, we are going to be talking about politics and relationships. And as we all know, the past few years has been a very heavy topic regarding this situation. And I'm sure it's had an impact not only on intimate relationships, but also family relationships. But before we start, Sam, how's your week been?
I mean, the week's been exceptionally well. I've added some new clientele to the coaching consulting company.
Awesome.
The construction company is going well, and we're really in a good groove with the family of spending a lot of time outdoors. And
Awesome.
I'm on this Pokemon binge right now.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. I grew up, I never knew a single thing about Pokemon.
Mhm.
Not a single thing. And it kind of sounds ridiculous talking about it, but I'm the type of guy that if widgets are popular and could be worth something in the future, well, I'm going to get into them while they're hot and, seem to be the fad or the trend for now. But it's really interesting because I'm opening up these packs and the kids are going nuts. Oh, here's this card and it's a superpower with 90 points and it doesn't. I'm just thinking in my head, well, okay, what's this worth?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's pretty interesting. It's amazing to think that, I was speaking to a friend of mine who has a hobby shop, and he says the majority of the people that are coming into his hobby shop are in their 30s and 40s buying these things. And I'm like, I never heard of these things growing up, Pokemon. There's always other things, right? But apparently they're saying that playing cards are going to be the art of the future. For some of you who are looking for investments in the future, maybe check your old boxes, your kids' toys down in the basement. There might be some stuff that could be of value now or someday in the future. So it's just a lot of fun doing something with the boys, and I just got to figure out what I'm going to do with Ellie. I asked her if she wanted to get into My Little Pony cards, but she wasn't interested. So I'll leave it to her to figure out what we can do together.
That's kind of nice, though. That's
yeah. How's work going with you?
Work is great.
Yeah.
I have no complaints. Like I was saying, everyone's happy and healthy, and everyone's just doing their best. And I think that's what matters the most. I haven't really enjoyed going into work as much as I have this year, to be quite honest with you.
You have or haven't?
Haven't. This has been
Really?
one of the years where it's like I feel almost reignited with why I went into this profession, which is great. The kids are feeling it. I'm feeling it. It's showing through their work, through my passion, etc. Which I'm happy. I'm happy, super happy. But before we begin to support this channel, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit this notification bell. Share this with anybody that you think might be going through a similar situation. You never know. And they may be able to pay it forward to someone else as well. So on that note, Sam, let's get it started. So politics and relationships. The first pointer that you brought up was right in front of our faces. And why is it so prevalent that possible relationships might end due to differing political views?
Here's what's quite interesting after I did some research on this. Having different political views for breakup is higher than smoking. It actually affects 11% of relationships in the US that break up. And in millennials, it goes to as high as 22% of relationships that politics play in the breakup. And I think, if you really think about the fundamentals of relationships, I mean, there's so much more than just political views, but we're just so polarized today. I mean, number one, if you're a hardcore leftist or rightist, and for some of you who don't know, you're either liberal or you're a conservative. And how this has such a deep, profound effect on relationships. I never really understood it until I seen the power of politics and different political views and how it played such a huge spectrum in social media. Right. I mean, I could see people that we knew post things that I would say are conservative, and people that would never go on their stuff to leave comments or even maybe hit the like button, are on there just ridiculing their views and the fact that they would post these things. So I could just imagine if you're in a relationship with somebody where we're so polarized because of what's going on over there in the US with Biden and Trump, and how it can really take the polarity out of relationships, because I think a lot of the times we're not conscious of what we're doing in relationships. We're kind of by nature, our habits come out at the core of us. So we are habitually just reactive, right? Without even being conscious of what we're doing. And so, yeah, I get how, 11% of traditional relationships, if you take that demographic and average it out, is 11% that lead to breakups, and 22% of millennials. Now, isn't that funny that millennials is 100% higher than that of the average age demographic? Gina, you're frozen again. All right, I'm sure she'll come back. And it's really interesting because everybody, Gina, I can hear you fiddling with your computer, but you're frozen. I'm not sure if you can hear. So you're there? Okay, why don't you re-log in and maybe go to a different spot in your. I can hear you, just no picture.
Okay. I'm just gonna take my picture off for a little while. I don't know why. I'm in a very good zone, so maybe the weather.
Okay, so let's talk about how the breakup when it comes to politics affects millennials by 100% higher than that of the average demographic. In your views, based on who millennials are, why do you think it's impacted relationships that much more, millennials than others?
I think it's impacted millennials more because we create such a victim mentality now. I think that there's such a huge number of the current generation where their entitlement is easily offended, so to speak. And I don't know if you see it, but I see it. God forbid you have an opinion about something that is not of the left or possibly the right. Opinions aren't just opinions anymore. It definitely categorizes you into right or wrong. And if you are a part of the minority, well, then you will definitely be wrong, if that makes sense. And the entitlement that lies with the new generation is creating more victims. It's creating more, well, you're wrong, and there's no way you can be right because majority says you're wrong. And I think there's a huge disconnect there where it's like, well, so I don't know if you remember or if you recall, but the left and the rights weren't so divided as they are now. There kind of was like some middle ground back in the day, but now it's like completely like you're on the left wall, I'm on the right wall, and this is where we stand, and you choose. You better choose which side you are on, because it is so divided now. And like all of the what's the word I'm looking for? Extremist groups that belong to each end of the spectrum. They are so extreme that the divide is created, and it is so separated now, where there is no middle ground. You can't meet in the middle and be like, okay, well, this sounds good, that sounds good, let's come together as a collaborative. It is so divided. And we saw it with this past election, where it's just so divided. There is no middle ground at all. So I think this generation, there is just a complete victim mentality. They're not willing to see cause and effect in it all. They're just willing to see cause. So that's my thought.
I mean, those are some great thoughts. And I mean, if we could look at the millennial generation, I mean, what created that? I mean, there's a lot of profound things, and I kind of want to stay on the topic of how, millennials tie into politics and why they're 100% higher than the average demographic of people, where the 11% are breakups from politics versus 22% of millennials, is that they were raised in a completely different environment than that of which we were raised in.
Right.
You got to remember, they are raised by the state.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, traditionally millennials were raised with both parents working. Right. Where I don't know what the percentage of population of people who are parenting prior to the millennials, let's call it our generation, where one was working and one would stay at home with the kids. Correct. Or maybe when the kids got older, the other person worked. So, there was always someone from our generation that was indoctrinated the children with your own family beliefs, political beliefs, religious beliefs, and values and beliefs, and etc. Well, if you take into consideration the millennial generation, they are indoctrinated into an environment where it's all government-driven sources, and you have the teachers having the biggest impact on the children's lives, because that's where they spend most of their time. And where is all the indoctrination and the information coming from? Education? Well, it obviously has to get approved by the government and people who are from forms of the government. And so it's easy to see why millennials get so emotional when it comes to politics, because they were literally raised by another parent, and that's called the government. Yeah. Right. So yeah, I totally get it. I can see why they would be so polarized when it comes to something like this, because it's almost like you're taking an offense or an attack on one of their parents, whether it's conservative or whether it is democratic. Right. And it's funny because, I have friends from both sides of the spectrums, and, I've gone out with dinners with people, and if someone brings up something about Trump and there's people the opposite, they don't take 2 seconds to, fly up the shaming pole and, unleashing the hounds and just not being afraid to share their thoughts and opinions, which is great. And there's also on the other side too, the people that, could be family, could be friends that are also on the other side of things, who, might say something, to attack people who are very, liberal viewed. And, I myself, I'm a political atheist. I don't believe in left. I don't believe in right. I just believe in seeking the truth and, holding people accountable who are going to be in charge. Now, if I was to pick a side, I would definitely say I'm definitely more on the conservative side, but I'm definitely a political atheist. I don't get polarized by one or the other. Just, I'm hopeful that people do the right thing. And so, yeah, it's not hard to see why millennials is 100% higher than that of the average demographic, because, like I said, their second parent is the government, is the school system. And so it's so easily to be polarized by the things that are happening politically, because that's basically what's in their belief system. Right. A lot of it's not family driven. It's not, their family's church beliefs driven. It's not, the conversation that was going on at home. They don't even know what that is, because there was a daycare. There was school before care. There was school after care. And why? Because the parents are busy. Yeah. And so here we are today. And, and here's another key fact. Of all relationships, 30% of relationships are bipartisan, which means opposite political views. And so while they say that the opposites attract and creates polarity, it's easy to see today with social media and everything being just so out there in your face that it has such a big impact on relationships today. Right.
Well, I think it would, because I mean, the people that are getting into relationships, it's understanding how to navigate those differences. And when you
100%.
Right? So now it's like, well, okay, a lot of the times, especially I think more female centric than male, you have to be sensitive to those people's needs a little bit more. And when you're not, there's such an upheaval of how to maneuver the differences. And I really don't think, because they don't see the role models at home, like you're saying, because the state governs, you know, their upbringing, et cetera, they're not seeing the role models right now, you know, going through those trials and tribulations. They're just choosing a side and being like, okay, well, this is right because I was told this was right, and this is wrong for so many reasons. And when you have someone with those beliefs, they don't know how to navigate them as a you know, co-relationship, because they don't have those role models anymore, like you said, right? It's so separated where it's like, okay, and I have to say, like, I see it all the time. Majority of children are state influenced, are government influenced. And of course, they're going to attach their beliefs very early on to those children, right? So, and I think the left has a lot to do with that, right? So, anything you want to say about the left and the right before we move on, Sam?
I want to just share one more thing.
Yes.
And for anybody who's watching this, I want you to understand why the politics and involvement and emotional stimulation from this election has been so polarized. And what is the one thing that's been taken away from us this year?
A lot of things. Our independence, our
social engagement.
Yeah.
So if you take that away, what becomes the focus? What's in your face? And that was the one thing that's been in front of our face the whole year, when there was gaps between the coronavirus and what happened with that gentleman in the US who, you know, unfortunately passed away from the police, is that there's nothing to do and talk about.
Yeah.
It's all politics. It's all social media. Nobody has anything else better to do with their time other than, like, there's probably, like, I have never been so politically involved in an election other than this one.
Yeah.
And if people can take a step back and really see why this one was so impactful, well, look at what we have all done. We are social creatures by nature.
Yeah.
And that was literally stripped away from us, that very freedom.
Yeah.
Right? So what do? You find the one way to socially engage.
Yeah.
And it became a political topic this year.
Yeah, absolutely.
We got a comment from Jason. Mm-hmm. I got to tell you, this guy here is going to be a YouTube sensation. He has not even been doing YouTube for 6 months. He's got almost 700 subs and just had a video the other week that he posted at 54,000 views.
Amazing.
54th. So for you guys, if you guys watch this in the future, go check out Jason at his channel. One of the top-notch, if not the best, tribute to Elvis Presley channel.
That's so great. That's so great.
Yeah.
You want to comment on your last quote here, Sam?
We didn't touch on the beliefs.
Okay, go for it.
And so you're in a relationship. You have different political views. Mm-hmm. It's causing a lot of problems. What do? Well, you have to get at the core of it. And that is, what's driving you? What drives us all to either be angry, mm-hmm. to be understanding, compassionate, empathetic, resentful, frustrated? They're called beliefs.
Yeah.
And there's one thing that I learned from Tony Robbins. It doesn't really matter what happens to you in your life. We all have a home that we go to. Right. And that's an emotional home that is created from our beliefs. Yeah. So by nature, you know, we all have either a way we're going to go to the left or the right. But because that very core of our nature was taken away from this year, you have to understand why this was so polarized. And the media did a great job of catching our attention this year. So bravo to them, 5 stars for, what they did. But if you're in a situation where, I don't care where you are in the country, I mean, let's face it, this election has affected us all in one way, shape, or form. And one of the key things that, are very important is, and I've even gotten in my conversation with my wife and my relationship about stuff like this, is you really have to get into acceptance.
Yeah.
And one of those things, what I mean by that is that by nature, we are all different.
Right.
Even if it has nothing to do with your political views, there will always be something else. So just get into that position where you're automatically going to get into a place of acceptance, which means I don't care if you're a millennial, I don't care if you're 50 or if you're 70. You don't have to get triggered if you go into a place of acceptance, which means, we are going to find a fine line that we don't cross when it comes to our political views. And that means we're going to create a nurturing respect between one another's views, even if they're different. And also what I'd like to add, that is focus on the things that, might be different, that might also be impactful in a positive way, that can be useful to the relationship, that maybe open your mind to a different view, to something that you don't see. It's not that you have to like it, but just learn to embrace it and don't get so polarized in such a negative way. And at the end of the day, at the core of it all, when it comes to your beliefs, you really have to get into a place of connection, and uncertainty, which is another human need, which is the variety. Don't be so fixated on what your views are and what someone else's are and what they're not. Just get into a place where I've chosen to be with this person in my life, and no matter what, as you remember those vows, through thickness and thin, through sickness and health, they should have added, with indifferences of political views, I'm going to be in a place of understanding, and acceptance, because that is what love is.
Yeah.
Love is the opposite of that, which has to do with being an individual. And so, yes, you can have your own individual beliefs when it comes to politics, but when it comes to relationships, you have to find a common place, not where you're giving up what you believe, but try to find a way where you can nurture one another's views, where you're kind of working towards the same path.
Right. And don't forget, a lot of people's beliefs are so entrenched based on their family's beliefs. And, if they grew up knowing one thing, then that's something that they indoctrinate for themselves. So it's like, also give yourself an opportunity to figure out what your true beliefs are at the core, right? Give yourself some time to actually figure out what you believe in for yourself, right? Not something that has been ingrained for years for you to think that that's what is true for you. What is really true for you? Think about it, right? And you're right. Come with connection and love and open heart to understand, other people's opinions and views. Because at the core, I think, like you said, there's a commonality of good, right? Wanting good for something, right? For the whole, or for families, or etc. But on that note,
and I just want to add to that, you actually touched on a good point.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sometimes we aren't even conscious of the way we're reacting to things like this, because family does play a part in it. What type of household were you raised in? How did they react and respond to politics? And, how did your parents engage in that? So if you're repeating that same cycle, and, you've seen the outcome of what your parents' relationship was, and if it wasn't going down a good direction, maybe it's time to create a different path, because you also have little eyes watching you too.
Exactly.
And so on our final note here, don't try to be right. Do the right thing. Right. It's really important when it comes to relationships to, not always try to be right, but to focus on doing the right thing, which is learning to always be understanding, respectful, loving, nurturing, empathetic, and to move forward in a common ground.
Yeah, exactly. Couldn't agree more. And I think that's the whole thing, right? You choose somebody, and I think you have an obligation to enter that relationship or that connection with an open heart and understanding, because there might be a reason why they're choosing what they're choosing, right? And understand where it comes from. So on that note, this is the relationship series, always talking about the matters of the heart and mind. And please, once again, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Ciao for now.